and each of those is responsible for organising a single race. They make up the VLN series, and here we are back for yet another season of racing around the Nordschleife. And our first real opportunity, John, to really get under the skin of this. And the first news is going to be that I won't be reading back a crushingly disappointing 193 car entry. 188 cars will take the starts. Bitter goal.
Well, you say that, Graham. 3 cars didn't go out in the qualifying this morning. 292, 33 and 357 did not clock a time. That's an SP3 car, an SP9 and one of the Cup 1 cars.
Well, 185 cars, John, it's barely worth them starting this race, surely.
Bright sunshine and early spring sunshine at that in the Eifel Mountains, running on the shorter version of the Grand Prix track, which takes in, which doesn't go all the way to the bottom of the hill. If you've been on Gran Turismo, you will know exactly what we're talking about here. This is the standard VLN circuit. It shortens up the track just a wee bit. It's only at the Nürburgring 24 hours that they use the full Grand Prix circuit before heading out onto the Nordschleife. The third member of the team in terms of being behind a mic, or in front of a mic, I suppose you could say, is Johnny Palmer. Good morning, Johnny.
Good morning, John.
Looking forward to this?
Oh, just a bit, yeah. I mean, this is the first of 9 races, let us not forget, as well. 4 hours or thereabouts for each, and this is just a phenomenal circuit, isn't it? It's worldwide known, and I think due, for the main part, because of that computer game you just mentioned, many people will have attempted this lap. I still can't remember where it goes, frankly, and I remember speaking to Tom Onslow-Cole last weekend to make sure that he had done enough laps, because this will be his first race on this circuit, and he certainly does know where it goes. But not only do you need to know where the left and rights are, but you also need to know where you're gonna put the car when you're lapping slower cars, where the grip is, which curbs you can ride and which you can't.
It will be tricky out on the Nordschleife at this time of day. It's been very cold overnight. There will possibly still be some damp patches under the trees. Just seeing the WTM Ferrari going out, and that might be a new team name to some people. WTM is the Wochenspiegel team that they've sort of shortened it down again. The big news there, Graham, is that is a Ferrari.
It's a full season Ferrari. We've not seen very many full season Ferrari. We've not seen very many of those. And I think the key to this one, John, is it might not be. Well, in fact, there's 2 Ferraris in this race. There's a Ferrari 458 in one of the other classes. We may, and this will be another theme through the racing to come, may see another Ferrari joining in the fun later this season, and the crew that will race that Ferrari already here. This is the theme, because this is, of course, first race of the season. There are a number of well-known faces intending to race later this season, both in the VLN and in the Nürburgring 24 hours, and they will be here, not in the GT3 cars we're currently looking at, but in some of the lower class cars to effectively get that licence. The title of a ringmeister is hard won, but with the safety concerns, particularly in recent years, a new system now, you're very well aware of this, John, to licence race drivers on the Nürburgring. That means you have to go through a series of tests outside of racing, then tests within the race in a lower powered car. And we've got some pretty exciting crews and some very familiar crews to Radio Le Mans listeners in some of the BMW M235Is, including GP2 race winners and champions, including some very well established names in sports cars, and including an ex-Formula 1 driver.
Yeah, and the lesser powered cars of which you speak tend to be GT86s or BRZs, and some of the M235 cars, which were specifically designed by BMW for racing on the Nordschleife. And that class, which I think is the Cup 5 class, that has a stunning entry in it and of itself.
It's 22 cars deep, and deep is the word in that instance. VLN rules have encouraged all sorts of people to get involved in some of the mixed class racing. VLN rules came down to what was the champion would be basically determined, the overall champion, by effectively the driver that won in the car with the most entries, because it's about competition within the classes as well as for the overall wins, and that's why we've seen the likes of Sean Paul Breslin, who's now the team principal at Black Falcon, an ex-VLN champion, rise to the top, because he recognised the best team with a very well prepared car in a class that had lots of cars in it, and took home the VLN championship some years ago.
So the cars are streaming out of the pit lane, heading down to that first corner. There are over, the top half of the top third of the grid, there are over 30 SP9s, which are the GT Full House GT3 cars. And we are now cycling down through some of the touring cars, Renault Clios and other classes, by no means lesser classes. They are all competing, of course. Strange reports from the Nürburgring, and thank you to Søren Soveg, who has sent us some news through from the press room. Strange reports this morning in the training, in the qualifying sessions, of what are homologated GT3 cars having quite significant changes made to them.
I think there's two or three things. This is the start of the season. We know this is, and we love you for it, VLN, one of the very few championships still to have an entirely open tyre formula. We talk about this, John, every year with the Nürburgring 24 Hours, that it hovers around double figures in terms of the number of tyre companies involved in this. But the tyre companies, it's hot competition here, because a win on the Nürburgring is very marketable. And the first thing to actually say, it's something we should be watching for. HTP and Black Falcon, for instance, are running a works-blessed Mercedes-AMG GT3 each, one on Dunlop and one on Michelin. WRT are doing the same. Land Motorsport are running Michelin's only. There's some new aero regulations at the VLN this year. Some teams, and keep an eye out for this, it's going to be subtle, have cut the rear wing. Some have moved it forward on the GT3 cars as well. So look for some subtle differences. There's the second Ferrari, by the way, just going through the screen. It's a Ferrari 458, but there's going to be some subtle differences. They try to squeeze the best they possibly can out of the available rule book. We see it time and time again, but we don't, you're quite right, John, we don't often see this on homologated GT cars nowadays.
So the long-winded affair of getting all these cars around on the shortened Grand Prix circuit, and by shortened I mean you come out of the Mercedes arena, down the hill, and then there's a sharp right-hand hairpin. It's used for the truck racing that takes place here as well, and the smaller club events. But obviously once you get then round to the hairpin that would ordinarily bring you back onto the main straight during a Grand Prix weekend, you're then turning sharp left and starting the long haul on the Nordschleife. So this meeting very slightly different from your regular Nürburgring 24 hours. The Nordschleife is 20.81 kilometres in length. That's 12.93 miles and incorporates 154 turns. It's going to be incredibly busy for the majority of this race for all the GT3 runners, of which there are 34 the last time I counted, and they're labelled as special cars, special 9 cars, SP9, and as Graham says, there are a couple of Ferraris. We have Porsches, though, apparently dominant in qualifying, with 3 of them at the pointy end of the field. The 911 car from Manthey Racing, clearly experts around this place, will start alongside the number 4 Falcon Motorsports machine of Martin Ragginger, Jörg Bergmeister and Lawrence Vantor.
Yes, second row, Porsche and Audi. 4-hour race, by the way, for those who are asking, at Specutainment, at Blackpool Johnny and at DSC Editor. It is the number 12 car, that's the Clos, Müller and Renard machine. Alongside that, the first of the Audis, the 49. Marcel Fessler putting in the time on that car of an 8:03, a 3:25. 8:016, by the way, is about 5 seconds quicker than the pole position for this race has been in the last couple of seasons. Continuing down the grid, Johnny.
Where did you get to? The
second row, sorry.
Second row.
Swapping
okay.
and changing.
Not too far then. We've only got another 180 odd cars to do. So on the 5th and 6th places, so this is the third row, cars 37 and 50. The Bentley Continental GT3 from Team AT, Christian Mamarov, Nico Verdonk and Jordan Pepper, alongside Frank Stifler, René Rast and Fred Verviche in their Audi R8 LMS from the WRT crew. They're the only non-German based team, our team WRT, hailing from Belgium. 28 and 5 are on the next row, so in positions 7th and 8th. It's an all Audi R8 LMS affair. Christian Mies, Conor Di Filippi and Marcus Winkelhock alongside Frank Stifler, Nikolai Molomadsen and Dennis Busch. And then we have in 9th and 10th positions another Bentley from Team AT alongside the Audi Sport Team Lant entry of Pierre Caffer and Christopher Haase.
As we said, the top 30 is pretty much made up of the GT3 cars. There is an interloper, Johnny, and that comes in at position number 20. That's the 702, which is the rather beautiful and still, for me, under-raced Glickenhaus. This is a car that we took great interest in a couple of years ago at the 24 hours of the Nürburgring, when the man behind the project showed us around the car. That's still available on the radiolemans.com archive, by the way. We do hear, Graham, that that car, or at least cars like it, may well be racing in other championships too.
And have done. Did last year. We saw them out in the 24H series at Mugello and I think elsewhere. I think we may have seen one off one of the cars in GT Open. I've got a funny feeling that was a class-winning car there too. And there's new derivatives of that car, and Jim Glickenhaus now, of course, beginning to build a short run of highly expensive but highly beautiful road car versions of that, of the Glickenhaus SGC003. But I believe with a very different engine. Instead of the HPD LMP2 derived engine in that car, that it's some form of BMW power plant, still with big power and huge torque.
Rather than it was a
HPD,
Honda. Yeah,
yes.
it was a Honda HPD race engine, wasn't it? That they had down-tuned for that, believe it or not. Running down the entry list for other class pole sitters, if I can, and that is going to be a problem because I've just realised this doesn't have classes on this particular timing screen that I have. Okay. However, there are legion in these classes in terms of how many classes there are. The usual script, people sharing pits and teams, yes, trying to get together, but not always the ability to do that. And because of the length of the track, the warm-up lap is for an 11 o'clock start in the UK, 12 o'clock at the circuit. That will start 20 minutes before the scheduled green flag time. Now, for those of you who haven't experienced racing on the Nürburgring Nordschleife in the past, basically reset your minds from anything that you have ever witnessed before in terms of racing, because everything happens at a different pace. There are more cars, and the track is longer. The lap times are 8 minutes plus, and therefore the stints in terms of laps are much shorter in terms of numbers of laps. It is basically a complete reset. Very busy grid out in the sunshine at the moment. So some storylines that Johannes Guaglica and others have pointed out to us, and thanks to all of our German colleagues for their support in this.
And Austrian.
And Austrian, yes.
Absolutely.
German and Austrian colleagues. Sorry, Johannes.
Graham, just going back to the Glickenhaus entry, on the entry list, it's actually listed as Traum Motorsport from Switzerland.
Has been before.
Is that a customer?
It's the original. It's the original customer team. You'll recall we've had two Glickenhaus cars. I think that is the owner of that car.
Right.
So there are two race cars we've seen in Nürburgring competition: a black car and a yellow car. The yellow car is the first customer car. That's the car we're going to see today.
Thank you for clearing that up. It is labelled, as you say, as an CG 003C, which rolls off the tongue, and yeah, it starts right in the middle of a pack of SP9 cars. It's an SPX machine labelled as a special, effectively a special.
But remember, this
extra.
car was built to what you might say are the GT3 regulations. There aren't any GT3 technical regulations, or there are precious few, should I say. The whole concept of GT3 is about repeatability. And once you have homologated the car, you can't make any changes to it, and it has to turn up at the track with every nut and bolt within specification. But this car, where there are regulations in terms of wing height, glass sizes, wheelbase, also axle widths and things like that, it has been designed, Graham, to comply with those, so that when a correct number of road cars have been built, it could be homologated as a GT3 car.
Yes, indeed, and it's going to take some time. They're a small manufacturer. It'll take some time for that, and they're going to need to find some very wealthy customers for that car. But it is the most spectacular looking thing. Looks like a concept car, but it's a perfectly functional race car and of course road car. Other things to watch for: some of the manufacturer representatives talking to Zoran Herweg on site for us down at the Nürburgring with the air and tyre changes we've seen this year. We've seen from the inside of the man filters.
Mercedes-Benz.
And looking ahead, I think that's the Zakspeed Nissan. It's got a couple of interesting names been added against the already announced Tom Coronel in that car. And
that's the only GT3 Nissan, by the way, so
well,
it must be.
Florian Strauss is in that car, and there is Johansson. Now, I'm guessing that's Stefan Johansson.
Yeah, because when I was looking at the entry list a couple of days ago, it was only Tom Coronel listed against that car. And I thought, now, Tom's been around for a little while. Can he do 4 hours on his own? Which I'm sure he's perfectly capable of, but there are 2 other drivers joining him at least.
Yes.
Is that right?
Yes,
So
Florian Strauss is definitely one of them, another of the GT
yeah.
Academy winners, of course, from past years. But there is a Johansson added to it, and the spelling is correct for that to be Steve Johnson of ex-Ferrari F1 ilk. I'm just attempting to check that as we speak, actually.
Okay.
The usual pack of people on the grid, which always amazes me that we can ever go motor racing just a few moments after we look down to see. Well, it's that philosophical question again. If you can't see the cars on the grid, are they actually still there? Well, the answer, if you have a look at the onboards, is yes, they are, but they are surrounded without the need for any tensor barriers or ropes, by the way, by very knowledgeable fans. In fact, the rope is at the front of the grid to ensure people go back into the pit lane and don't wander off down to the first corner.
It's either that or they're fueling one of the cars, and it's a very long thing for the pump, but I think you're probably right.
Yeah, it is a rope, and the unique atmosphere that is racing on the Nürburgring, the Haribo Bear in the middle of action as well, next to their sponsored car, and the grandstands are open to the public for free. You can wander around. There's paddock access. Anyone who has paddock access, if the car's engines aren't running, you're allowed into the pit lane and on the grid. It's an extraordinary event, a set of events, and this is the first of 9 of the VLN series. Sherbeth BMW, the number 20 car, is running in carbon black and bright lime green for its accents and mirrors. I'm very disappointed, by the way, that Andy Blackmore has not produced the spotlight guide for this. I think it's slacking.
Very, very remiss. I gather he only got as far as 159 cars, and at that point it's just not worth bothering, really. There's no point in attempting it.
The yellow thing on the grid is the Haribo Bear, by the way, for those of you who are tweeting in. Thank you, Nick.
Or the Porsche, depending on where you're looking.
Is that the Porsche on the front row? Yes, it is. It is the Porsche.
With a real-life elderly canine learning old tricks, and of course a reigning world champion in Romain Dumas, who set the pole lap. What was that? 5 seconds quicker than last year.
5 seconds quicker than last year. Correct. If the yes, 8:01.661 the pole time, and in fact the top top 14 all underneath the pole time from last year. That's down to the Mercedes-Benz number 48 sitting on the outside of the 7th row of the grid. Live coverage of the VLN1 from the Nürburgring for the first time here on radiolemans.com in sound and vision. Thanks to our colleagues at VLN and Vega Technologies for putting this together for us. I'm John Hindhaugh, Johnny Palmer and Graham Goodwin, editor of dailysportscar.com.
Yep, just a quick shot of bananas being imbibed before we get to on-track running. The grid is beginning to clear now. Just to complete the point from Zoran on site there, is the manufacturer's representatives say with the aero and the tyre changes we've seen this year, that lap times should have increased by about 6 to 10 seconds. Remember, pole laps, yes, we're talking about a 6-second improvement on last year, but weather plays a massive part here at the Nürburgring. Last year's fastest lap was in this race was a 7:54, so that's bang on for what they're expecting, which is the lap times should have increased by between 6 and 10 seconds year on year, with changes for tyres, changes for aero. Let's wait and see what happens when the lights go green here in the race itself.
Interesting car down in 57th position is the 801. That's the first of the new Audi RS3 LMS TCR cars. Now that is an Audi customer racing piece of kit. It's in there with Porsche Cayman GT4 Club Sports and the Lexus RC, the 307 car sitting around that as well. A couple of Seats around that area as well. It is not the best of the TCR cars, which would appear to me to be the 802, which is a Volkswagen Golf GTI TCR.
Another handsome piece of TCR machinery. Being asked about the car second on the grid there, yes, that is a Falcon Porsche. Falcon
Yes.
expanding their effort for the first time for the team that races, if you like, for the Falcon factory to a two-car effort. And very unusually, it's a mixed car team with this Porsche, Martin Ragginger putting that car second on the grid, and also I'm sure we'll see later their new BMW M6 GT3. That car, they did trial run a BMW in one of the VLN races last year, but there will be a full season for that car, and we'll see both at the Nürburgring 24 Hours of course as well. Gives them, of course, John, the opportunity, should BOP not work quite in their favour, have two shots in their gun, but also big opportunity in what's going to be an ever more competitive tyre war, I think, in the VLN moving forward, to actually have two demo cars, if you like.
Yeah, that's a fair point. As you were mentioning, Graham, the tyre battle here is extraordinary, with over the years somewhere in the region of 10 different tyre companies having been involved, and sometimes all at the same time. It is an extraordinary thing that this is still an open tyre formula, and much like the Super GT, Johnny, that does drive the tyre companies on. A lot of them, of course, have development centres and testing centres on Gottlieb Daimlerstrasse, which is a stone's throw away from the grid, which is now being cleared of non-essential personnel. And to have this test track, this ability to showcase your product for the tyre companies is quite remarkable, because as in Super GT, we see different tyre manufacturers on the same manufacturer of car.
Yeah, I think it would be entirely wrong to all of a sudden stamp a one-tyre manufacturer on an event like this, because think of the track mileage that each of those tyre manufacturers is getting around this place at each VLN event. So 9 of these 4-hour-ish length of races. Today's is a 4-hour, and then of course the 24 hours of Nürburgring, which stands entirely alone from the series. But again, the amount of mileage that each tyre manufacturer is getting in across the season, and as you say, I think it is Graham Goodwin and I spent some of last year's Nürburgring 24-hour week going round counting the number of tyre manufacturers are there. I think we reached 11 at one point.
It was 10 or 11.
10 or 11, wasn't it? And they were all at the same event. And, yes, there is a rivalry there, but just think of the amount of data that all of those manufacturers are trawling in from every weekend.
One quick correction, by the way, not Stefan Johansson in the Nissan, and thanks again to Zoran Hero. It's Eric Johansson. And Eric Johansson is one of the winners of the Rickard Rydell Award. Previous winners of that award include the likes of Felix Rosenqvist and indeed Marcus Ericsson.
Wasn't he test driving a Zaxby Mercedes recently?
Test drove a Zaxby Mercedes Lash, and of course he's in their Nissan now.
Yep.
But he is single-seater racer coming into GT racing. How many times have we told that story? Great shot there, John, by the way, the second part of the grid. If you look through if you've got the vision here, look through the centre, you see the second of the safety car lines.
Yes, that is another point. Again, if you're new to this, all 188 of the starters that we are expecting will not be set off at the same time. It is grouped in performance levels, and therefore there will be multiple starting groups as the first of the safety cars, which is a Porsche Cayman, mid-engined Porsche, heading off on the Grand Prix circuit, and this is the bulk of the SP6 cars, the GT3 cars, with the Glickenhaus in there as well, rolling away. Packed crowd on the top of the pit lane building as the cars begin to roll off.
And it'd be a blessed relief for those fans on top of that pit building. The level of fan obsession with this means that these are people, John, that will not have gone home since the Nürburgring 24 Hours last year. They're just waiting for this year's race.
It's 5 months it's been since
it's
the
tribal.
5 months it's been since the last race here. During the winter months, of course, the weather is very difficult here, and it is not beyond the possibility that we might have had bad weather in this race, or indeed the second race. And in fact, we've had races stopped at this time of the year, as indeed we had at the 24-hour race last year, for snow, fog, ice and general just bad weather conditions.
The hailstorm during last year's Nürburgring 24 Hours is something we've never seen the like.
However, bright sunshine today at the Nürburgring. The Bentleys, the Mercedes-Benz, the BMWs, Falcon BMW going through onto the Grand Prix circuit, the Glickenhaus, as well as unusually Ferraris here, and great to see Johnny Ferraris racing on the Nürburgring Nordschleife. They have down through the years been, generally speaking, underrepresented as a brand.
Very much so, but the 488 is a beast in GT3 configuration, and they are steadily creeping in to various championships now around Europe, and I think quite rightly a non-German mark represented along with Bentley. But yes, as you say, it's Porsche, Audi, Mercedes and BMW that will start as the favourites, particularly Porsche. As you can see, the top three positions locked out by a day-glow yellow Porsche, the traditional Falcon Motorsports livery, the sort of turquoise blue with a slightly deeper blue Falcon Motorsports livery on the second of the Porsches, and then the Manthey Racing number 12 car, which is in the red and white that we've become used to. So first, second and third, and the first non-Porsche being the Belgian entry from Team WRT, the Audi R8 in fourth place.
Second of the grids rolling out. Check that, it's the third of the grids. We've got an Audi safety car leading the second, and that car has already rolled. So into the starters on row number 50 and down over. Remember, 188 cars listed this morning, although only 185 have actually set a time.
And keep an eye out for some of those BMW M235i's. One of the names that won't be in a BMW M235i in the Cup 5 class, I mentioned earlier, is Sam Tordoff, because Sam was part of an all-British trio that was due to take the starts in one of those cars. Tells us, and with thanks to Josh Barrett for this information, that Sam says after a slight mishap with that car, he's now going to be driving the FK Performance BMW Z4 number 456. So there are lots of, keep an eye out for the names, listen very carefully to some very familiar names up and down the grid. Includes the likes of Alex Lynn, who shares one of the BMWs with Will Stevens. Alex will be joining BMW for the Nürburgring 24 Hours. Will Stevens, clearly with a full season of Audi GT racing ahead of him, is looking for an opportunity to get his licence for the Nürburgring and to get in amongst potentially the Nürburgring 24 Hours too. Nick Johnson and long-time Le Mans teammates Tracy Crone are going to be in this race in a BMW M235i. And that looks to me, gentlemen, as if Tracy and Nick are looking to add another 24-hour race to their CVs after a record-breaking run of Le Mans 24-hour starts together.
But Graham, haven't we said this before about this race? That this circuit, which is truly a global icon, the Nürburgring Nordschleife is truly a global icon. That this is the track that people want to race on. It doesn't matter whether it's part of a championship, although this race is. If you want to call yourself a racing driver in GT or touring cars, you probably want to race here. The changes over the years, and we've already got some debris on the circuit, so it looks like there's been coming together on the Grand Prix track. That's a bit careless, to say the least, as I think now the 5th group, this is behind an Audi TT.
They are the Cup 5 cars. That's the Cup 5 cars, the 4 of this group. And you can see just there, we can see the Kissling Motorsport Manta as well in this group, the Foxtail car, a part of long-time Nürburgring legend, the Kissling Motorsport car. And great to see that back this season, together with its somewhat younger, but getting to be almost equally fan favourite Calibra will be there too somewhere. Elsa.
Now there are, in the tyre regs, there are some of the classes that do run on spec Hankooks, TCR and GT4 among them.
Yep, for the VLN.
For the VLN, not for the Nordschleife 24 hours, no indeed. So the last few grids of cars moving off. Think of this, if you are coming to this new, and I accept that many of you are around the world and may not have seen this type of racing before. Think of this effectively as a whole support series and main category of races. They just happen to be out on the track at the same time, and they all get 4 hours. Instead of trying to race, Johnny, a national categories, or several national categories, 6 or 7 or 8 or 9 national races, and give them all 45 minutes, what they've done here is blanked out 4 hours and effectively put them all on the track at the same time.
Yeah, which is fantastic, I think, because it's perfectly plausible to do that. The track is long enough. You could argue it's a little bit narrow in places, but then it makes it far more entertaining for us to watch the quicker cars have to get by the, in inverted commas, slower cars. And why not just have everybody out on all at once, because it's a great use of time. It means that, you know, you can cycle through as many as 4 drivers if necessary. Some guys are doing it with just 3, but it reminds me a little bit, and I know this competition's been going a lot longer than the 24-hour series, particularly at Dubai, because that's various different classes thrown out for 24 hours, and the Dubai Autodrome, that's now into what, year 11 or 12 when they do it again in January 2018. This has been going for a mere 63 years, this one race, but it's a great idea, and you know, this, as you say, iconic track. Everyone wants to race on it, and so many people have the track map printed on the back of their car, don't they? And legitimately, these guys will be able to carry that from this weekend.
So the 62 Porsche is the noise that you can hear in the background, and weaving left and right, trying to get some heat into the tyres, and they are about a third of the way around the lap, heading downhill towards the hairpin before, the left-handed hairpin before you sweep right, and then down to the bridge. Amazing the size of this grid, that there are cars a third and more around the Nordschleife, whilst the last groups are still rolling off. Schubert Motorsport BMW number 20, one of the sharp end of the grid, heading up over the bridge. That car will be starting in 18th position, now heading up to the spot where Nicky Lauda had his fiery accident. Remarkable still to me, every time I see this place or drive it, and particularly when I drive it, and it doesn't matter in what, that they used to race full house prototypes and Formula 1 cars around the Nordschleife. And notwithstanding the differences in attitudes nowadays, that to me is still simply extraordinary. And as Tim Gray reminds me, 500cc motorcycles used to race round here. That just beggars belief, Graham.
It's staggering, isn't it? It's a beautiful spring day we're seeing around
Sun's
the track
still a bit low, Graham. There's going to be points here where
Absolutely.
you're in and out of the trees. The leading cars now heading up towards the higher parts of the circuit, and up towards the front end of the grid already is going to be heading up to the carousel. Just extraordinary. What a place this is.
And unless you, even the behind the safety cars at the moment, this is probably quicker, John, than most of we mere members of the public have managed getting around this track.
Speak for yourself.
I said mere members of the public, not racing gods. But it's just an extraordinary place to go motor racing. There are very few places like it on the planet, not just the track, but for the way in which the community in the area embraces
Absolutely.
what this all means. You don't go into a hotel reception or a bar or a restaurant without there being memorabilia, pictures, you name it, on the walls, on the shelves. Yet they know how important this is to the whole culture of the area, and I mean that word in exactly that sense. There are very few places around the same. We had a little bit of it, didn't we, Johnny Magello, where they clearly embrace the heritage there, but highly unusual in this day and age.
It will be Tom Onslow Cole who will start the number 19 BMW M6 GT3. That news just coming to us, thank you. As the leading cars already through and out of the carousel. And heading to the section of the track that all looks very similar. And the problem with the Nürburgring Nordschleife, Johnny, is that there are bits of it where you go, yes, I know this. It goes, no, it doesn't go left here, it goes right. Oh dear. So heading out of the carousel through Wippermann, Eichbach, Brünchen, and down the frighteningly fast Flansgarden towards the second of the carousels, and then of course down the long straight that anyone who's been to do the tourist laps will know is where you normally join and leave the Dottinger Höhe through Tiergarten and back onto the Grand Prix loop. Beautiful day, Johnny. This is absolutely perfect to kick off the 2017 VLN season.
Yeah, it is. I think your point about going under the trees could be valid, though, because it will take a little bit longer for the moisture to clear there. Most of the guys driving the GT3s will be well used to, well, probably racing the 24 hours and have therefore encountered far worse conditions than this. But it's, again, about not necessarily the first lap, which arguably is the easiest, I suppose you could say, because you're in clear air and you're just racing the cars within your class. But after, what, 4, 5, maybe 6 laps, you'll then catch the tail end of the 100 and, what did we say, 80 odd cars, 88 cars.
At least 185 have set laps.
And it won't take therefore very long, because of course they're started at 2-minute intervals as well. So
You'd be lucky to get a full lap, I think.
Really? Okay, you might well be right, yes. So maybe 1 or 2 laps and then you'll be straight into traffic for the next 4 hours, and that is where your knowledge of this place really is key, where you can take your car well over the curves that you need to stay well off. And we joke about certain bits of the track looking like others. Well, these guys know the place like the back of their hand. They could probably, you put a screenshot of anywhere around the circuit and they will tell you exactly where it is straight away.
So the Ferrari 488 just following the BMW at the moment to one of the more difficult parts of the circuit. You've got to keep the car over to the left-hand side of the road, as because that's the other thing, Graham, about this track. The issue with it is that it has got a camber, a brow in the middle of the road, because it has to drain, and sometimes you don't take what you would think of as a classic racing line, because you don't want to unsettle the car. I'm just coming down through Flansgarden now.
Well, Yeah, I think the other thing here, John, is it looks quite. We've said this before, haven't we? It looks so easy. When you look at it, an in-car shot, it often looks so easy. Less so here, actually. But the one thing that none of these, and I think it's going to be 186 cars to start, because one of the three that did not take to the grid, I think, is at the back of the first group. It's one of the Mercedes-Benz. Is those cars you will notice when you get any kind of in-car shot or even a still, do not have a big red button that says reset. You can get yourself in trouble really very quickly indeed around this track, and race-ending incidents come in the most unusual circumstances. Traffic gets involved with that. We've got, as Johnny was saying earlier, 34 GT3 spec cars with others that are just as quick, either around a full lap or in parts of the circuit. It's going to get busy from top to bottom of this track, and the cars are now coming back down the Dottinger, back down towards the start-finish straight.
So the first group of cars made up of GT3s plus the Glickenhaus, which is about smack bang in the middle of that, are weaving left and right. The very distinctive front row Porsches, bright yellow for the number 911, which will be on pole position, and the Falcon Motorsport number 4 behind them. The Manthey Racing number 12. First non-Porsche is an Audi. It's the 49 WRT on the outside of the second row. Bentley Team Apt on the inside of row 3 with the 37 car. Then the second of the WRT Audis, the 50 car, in 7th position. Audi Sport Team Land, the 28 car. Then Phoenix Racing, so that's an all Audi row on row 4. Row 5, Bentley Team Up with the 38 car, and then the second of the Land cars, the 29 machine. 11th and 12th, Mercedes-Benz AMG Team HTP with Zach Speed alongside them in the Nismo, the Nissan, number 24. 13th and 14th, the Aribo Racing Mercedes. It's the number 8, the 48 Manfilter Team HTP car. Then it's Black Falcon, the number 6, alongside them, the number 3, the BMW in Falcon colours. They're 15th and 16th. Schnitzer and Schubert, two classic names, great names of German motor racing, and they're together in 17th and 18th position in 2 more M6s. Black Falcon, number 7, the Moispath-based team with the Mercedes-Benz, and then the Cameron Glickenhaus of Traum Motorsport, the Swiss Enter team, makes up the top 20. The Cayman about to pull off into the pit lane live. It's race 1 of the 2017 VLN from the Nürburgring Nordschleife. Graham Goodwin, I'm John Hindorf, and this is Johnny Palmer.
So the new season begins with 4 cars abreast across the line very nearly. It looked like the 911 car didn't get away too well, nor the Falcon Motorsports machine, but further back, yes, they got away well now. Manthey hang on to 3rd position. We're not running the Haug hook this weekend, so it's a sharp right-hand hairpin around the full Mercedes arena, and the Dayglow yellow Porsche then has stayed out in front, with Roman Dumas setting the time. Fred Makovici and Patrick Pilet make it a stellar driver combination. Falcon Motorsport under pressure as the person of the Bentleys, the Team Apt car number 37, almost went for 2nd place there. It's going to slot into 3rd position. So a fantastic start for the Christian Mamaroff, Nico Verdonk and Jordan Pepper car from 5th up to 3rd place, chaps.
Yeah, that is the bright yellow, the second of the bright yellow machines with the darker rear end, slotting into 3rd position as they head down the hill on the Grand Prix circuit, and people desperately looking for places here and a bit of racing room before they head out onto the Nordschleife for the first time. Pretty decent start, and everyone being fairly sensible, but the leader getting away, and it's a decent jump away indeed for that Falcon car, as the pole sitter has rather been pole sitter, has got away. It's the Falcon car in 2nd position as they turn hard left onto the Nordschleife for the first time in the spring sunshine in the Eifel Mountains, and the Hudson back awaits as they dive down into that left-handed downhill hairpin. The number 8 Aribo Mercedes in traffic with the red and white Porsche right ahead of it. Very sensible start there. The clock has started. Already 2 minutes have passed before they get onto the Nordschleife. That's what I said about recalibrating yourself through the first of the chicanes on the Nordschleife, the end of the Hatzenbach down Hoeichen and up to the Flugplatz Schwedenkreuz. Now the second grid about to come through, and this is going to be, Graham, a good couple of minutes and more behind what we've seen here. So I'm not sure that those leading cars are going to get much more than one clear lap before they're onto the back of the 186 car field.
I think it's usually around lap 2, isn't it, when we get into Nürburgring 24 hours competition before we start to see the first of the traffic appearing. That's always presuming we're not going to be in trouble on the first lap. But here they come down. These are the Cup Class Porsches, the Caymans, the quicker middle-ranking GT cars, and they're about to go green right now, Johnny Palmer.
Certainly are. So the cars again are going to span out to at least 4 abreast. It looks to be a great start though from the pole car within this batch. Everybody else just fighting for asphalt as they run down towards turn number 1. It's got to be so careful, bearing in mind this is a 4-hour race, but you're also jostling for position for the first time through the Mercedes arena. Little Clio's in there together with the Porsche Cup cars and the Caymans as well. And there's almost there. In fact, there is contact there for second place, and the car in second going for a spin and almost going right across the track and across the bows. Everybody doing so well to avoid the sideways car. It was the 609 possibly that went sideways. Anyway, it's now rejoined and thankfully didn't get its rear end wiped off, but it was running the risk there of rolling back across the bows of everybody else. Remember, we're on the shortened version of the Grand Prix Strecke this weekend, so it's the sharp hairpin shortly after the Mercedes
It's quick,
arena.
that hairpin, Johnny. It is really quick.
Yeah.
We call it a hairpin. You've got to think of it as a long right-hander. Once you've got slowed down, you turn the car in and get straight on the gas. Graham, who was that was
That was the 609. That was the Wolfgang Destre piloted H4 Porsche. And that's a car off of the gravel. It's one of the OPC Astras.
It's one of the Astras. It is. Now, was there a touch? There was not a touch. It was very close quarters racing for the H4 Porsche, but it has gone around. This is the very bright lime green and yellow, very striking coloured machine, qualified right up at the sharp end of that second group. Third group coming through now with the BMW M235 Cup cars. Is this the third or the fourth group?
The third group.
The Manta is in there as well, and many of you will be cheering on the Manta with the Foxtail Volker Strycek amongst the driving talent there, the man who used to be the head of the Opel Performance Centre, OPC, who is also racing with his son and daughter in an OPC Cup car. And we've already got a pit caller as well from one of the early groups, shortcut into the pit lane, which is allowed. You are, remember, allowed to come through the back of the pits without going out onto the Nordschleife. Of course, that means that the first part of the lap has to be repeated.
I think that was that Opel Astra, John.
Out of the gravel?
Yes.
Yes, I think you're right, Graham. It was a bright red car. So, very good start for the Cup cars as they head into that very tricky downhill. Originally, if you're on the outside, the normal racing line, your braking is off camber and you've got to turn in across that camber. It is a horrible place to have a first corner. Bumping, barging, paint being swapped there by the 235s as they're heading out for their first racing lap. Getting the cobwebs knocked off literally as well as metaphorically there. These BMW 235s built with the intention of racing exactly where they are right now. This was a special limited run of 235s that was engineered by BMW Motorsport, BMW M, and they have been, since their release, Graham, an absolute mainstay of the Cup class, and we've seen them not just here but all over the world.
We've seen them in 24 Hours Racing. We've seen them at the Silverstone 24 Hours, all over the place. Not without the troubles initially, the M235Is. We've got another problem. This time it's the 494.
That's a Megane, isn't it?
And that's a Renault, yes. But not without their problems in the first races. But BMW responding rapidly to some problems there. It's the 494 Megane RS that's stationary on driver's left on the Grand Prix Strecke.
That is exactly the same as the type of car that I did my licence refresher in at Silverstone a couple of years ago. Got a little touch, I think.
That's the Astra from earlier.
That was the Astra from earlier, and that is at the top of the hill on the Grand Prix loop, just after the Schumacher S's.
That was the 345 car, we can now confidently say, with a slightly better shot of that.
I think there was contact for the Porsche that spun in the second
The
group,
H4 car, really?
Green and yellow car, yeah.
609 that was, wasn't it?
That 345 car, by the way, is one of 3 cars on the list with Vincent Rademacher on the
That's the red Astra that was first into the pits.
Absolutely, and that's one of the 2 Astras, as we've got the leaders coming back round now to
on the
first lap.
Dottinger.
2 Astra OPC Cups to have Vincent Rademacher and a pair of Korean drivers aboard, with Rademacher's 3rd car being one of the Hyundais, the factory-backed Hyundai. I do wonder whether or not that is going to lead to an all-Korean driver squad for the Nürburgring 24 Hours, gentlemen.
Well, take a hint on what is going on, as there is a bit of passing going on the circuit. The Bentley pulling out of the draft there and going to drivers left as they head up towards Tiergarten, down the hill. Then you use the upward part of the hill just to help you slow down your brake. Insanely late there for flinging the car. Use a little bit of the curb on the entry, but not in the middle. That's very off-putting for the car. Through goes the Falcon machine then. And it was the 911 that went through first, though. The bright yellow Porsche. Roman Dumacar, Martin Raginger in 2nd place. Then the Bentley Continental, the Abt car, in 3rd position, the 37. Then the first of the Audi, the Frank Stippler Audi. Then the 49. Then the 50 car. And then the Chris Mees, Conor De Filippi 28 Land Motorsport car. And they all went through within a few seconds of each other. Don't worry about big gaps here as well. The battles internecine at the moment between Audis in 6th and 7th position. But don't worry about big gaps beginning to open up, because this is the Nordschleife, Johnny, and we keep telling people, but I think it's worth reminding people, as the number 28 Land car sitting right in behind the 8. He's gone by the Mercedes, hasn't he? So he's in the 7th position for that car. We keep reminding people you have to think differently when you've got the Nordschleife and the Nürburgring. Even in a 4-hour race, this is not like any other 4-hour race. Gaps will go out, gaps will come down.
Yeah, and I think they'll really compress on this part of the circuit, being the Grand Prix bit where the corners come thick and fast. And then once you're through the left-hander, which is reasonably sharp, the corners still coming thick and fast because there's 150 odd of them on the Nordschleife, but you do get those opportunities to really let the car work itself as well, particularly down the Dosiger Höhe. But this fantastic sinuous sequence of corners that comes in the early bit of Nordschleife. Again, you've got to know the place very well and where the car can wash out a touch and where you've got to use plenty of curb, John.
This end of the Hatzenbach looks lovely. You can use the curbs. They're very, very flat in places. Coming to the right-hander before you head down and across the first of several bridges. Those, the inside curbs you can use, the outside you can't. Now heading up towards Flugplatz. The Land car now, is there a slight dab of the brakes before they go over the top? No, there isn't. They go absolutely flat out. Then the awesome double apex right-hander that comes and goes in a moment. Now, all climbing at this part of the circuit, and that's the key about, another key about this track, Graham, is that it was built into the surrounding areas in order to replicate the character and atmosphere of the public roads, to get racing off the public roads and try and make it safer and not have to go through people's back gardens.
Oh, the heady irony. But
Yes.
What I love about this track, everything, but what I particularly love about this track is that it comes at you in phases, doesn't it? There's that flowing part of the first part of the lap, just describing yourself and Johnny, where they're building speed. Then there's a wide open spaces where you build speed even more. Then you've got a section of it which is really just dogfight country. The corners are coming at you thick and fast, and that's where, if you've got the bravery, if you've got the speed, if you've got the traction, you can really make hay.
Get yourself on the internet and put yourself a little map in front of you and start looking at the speeds that are listed on some of these maps, because you're talking about getting up to 270 kilometres an hour and more down the Dottinger. But there are places in the twisties in the forest where you're getting up to 260, 270 kilometres an hour flat out in 6th gear. It's an awesome place to watch and to compete. And if you ever get a chance to drive there, the answer should always be yes.
Agreed entirely. It's just a great part of the region to come to, whether or not you're there to watch or you're there to participate in a race or on the tourist fair. And what we've got at the moment, John, is more than 180 crews taking the best option possible and getting into a proper race here.
Shea Adam, who is in Florida at the moment, good morning, Shea, pointing out that there has not been a live motorsport weekend that we've been involved with this year here at Radio Show Limited, and certainly that I have been involved with, that hasn't had Chris Meese in it this year. He has done every single live race.
He's now going to be known as Hindhaugh Stalker, Chris Meese.
I think it's the other way around. Opening salvos of a race that still has almost 3 hours and 50 minutes to go.
If you're watching, by the way, with live timing, I know an awful lot of the people who follow this racing do so. Don't be confused by the other Meese in the race. That is Alexander. That is Chris Meese's younger brother, who was a VLN champion last year.
So the second group of cars now coming through. The car that spun early on, the 609 Porsche, making its way back through some slower traffic as it turns hard left onto the Nordschleifer and the Hatzenbach.
As you would expect it to do, because that's a cup car, of course, versus some of the lesser powered Caymans, although still very quick machines in their own right. But yes, the driver of the 609 has made short work of the cars that it fell behind after that spin at the Mercedes Arena on the opening lap. Should now be into some clear air, so a real chance to gather some of those places up again. The 20 car, which is in 18th place, is the Schubert Motorsport BMW M6. Muller, Kuno Wittmer and Bruno Spengler. And you saw, John,
an intervention vehicle on the circuit, one of the small Opel SUVs, a Mocha or something like that. They're at the bottom of the hill, climbing up towards the carousel there, and it went by in a blur, dropping into the concrete section of the carousel, which goes on forever and ever and ever and ever. The man, Mercedes, I think, is ahead of the BMW, the number 20 car, as they head up towards the highest part of the circuit, which is called Hohe Acht.
Just lost a position there, popping out of the guttering, if you like, the carousel.
That was the Mercedes-Benz, yes?
Yes, going left so. And up the inside. I think it's one of the WRT Audis going by that car.
That was, yes, I think you are right. As the GT3 machines continue this awesome run, coming now down to Brunchen, just going through the iceback and turning left. Can't let the car drift too far to the right there. Now down into Brunchen, get the car turned in, stay off the curb on the left hand side, run over the bricks on the left, and now climbing again through the wooded area. Yellow flags waving there, and it's another intervention vehicle. It looked like it could have been a VW Golf or a Seat, but certainly looked like a small hatchback. Coming down towards Flansgarden now, and the Schwalbensfansche, the second of the carousel areas. And when you know this part of the circuit is absolutely flat out, and you ride all the curbs, and it looks to me, gentlemen, as if that Manfilter's Mercedes-Benz is struggling just a little bit. The Schubert car, the number 20, is right on it, and they are picking off. We were right. It was one lap, Graham. They are picking off cars at the back of the field that don't necessarily have problems. They are just going at the pace they go.
Absolutely right, and it's exactly what I was saying earlier, John, that they're going to see some of these, particularly GT3 cars, that are stronger than other makes in certain parts of the circuit, then drop back. We've got three all black, or near all black Audis. I was going to say nose to tail, but then the car pulls out to take that. It's a train of four cars.
That's
running.
Fourth down to 8.
It is indeed, looking for a way by. But so we're going to see strengths and weaknesses. There they go. It's nose to tail, the three of them, as they come to cross the line at the end of their second lap with further traffic to deal with.
That is an extraordinary sight as they cross the finishing line. and already gone through the Porsche 911 leading SP9, and that had a decent lead as it went through, as the three Audi start, Johnny, just to have a little bit of a scrap now. That's fourth on down. That's 5, 49, 50 and 28.
Yeah, and don't get confused that they're on the same team because they're painted the same. They're definitely not. And that was the 28 going for a dive at the inside of the number 50. And as a result, both ran out wide. And actually the car behind managed to almost overtake the two of them.
No, it was the 28 that was the car behind. It was 49 and 50 that went together, went off the circuit. 28 went up the inside,
And
almost
gained the
took
position.
both of them, but actually is now the meat in the Audi R8 sandwich. But
They seem
very
to be-
very easy to get these three confused.
They seem to be running just in carbon, as if they haven't decided what their colour schemes are going to be for the rest of the year. Or, in case, we don't like the car, we could always give it back and pretend we haven't used it. No, that's not going to happen,
Yeah,
is
right.
it?
It was 50 overtaking 49 and 28 right in the middle as well. And it ended up the 49 losing a place, I think, despite it initially making the move. And the 50 came out on top.
Bodywork on the circuit, and that is going to be, I'm afraid, another bit of marshal work. And thank you again to all of the volunteers around the circuit, and there are many here.
That piece of bodywork destined for the wall of a bar somewhere close, without a shadow of a doubt. And the usual thing
Just
will be,
reminded-
absolutely, we'll get one of the drivers to sign that.
Yeah, just reminded me that I forgot to pick up a Porsche bumper yesterday. I need to go back and do that.
You've not bumped it.
The leaders running through traffic on the Hatson back, and now it is so easy to lose time here because you are just a car's width off the circuit, off the ideal line, Graham.
And now we're into that next phase of the race. We've seen that, what you beautifully described during the N24 some years ago, John, as like a police chase. Now we'll still see that, but there'll be just that edge taken away a little with the additional challenge of these cars, the cars in traffic. Just look, if you can see the stream, how quickly those cars are being caught and passed.